I came across a post on Facebook yesterday about the important and highly controversial subject of gaslighting. This post was more helpful than most. It was actually for people to analyze their own words and remove gaslighting type of language from the way they approach people. So, for example, one of the ones that I found helpful and useful was, instead of saying "you can't take a joke," say something like, it was actually kind of harsh. I thought it was a little bit too much. What it said was, "I meant it as a joke, but it came across horribly wrong." Maybe it wasn't horribly wrong. Maybe it was actually a fairly well delivered joke, but the other person just didn't find it funny. So and this is kind of the theme of what I want to say here, is that in the process of avoiding gaslighting somebody else, that process should not look like me throwing myself under the bus or anybody else throwing themselves under the bus to protect somebody else's perception of what happened. So I thought that in that case there was a good middle ground. Like, instead of "I meant it as a joke, but it came across horribly wrong," what about "I meant it as a joke, but it didn't come across that way"? Right? I don't need to throw myself under the bus and say I delivered it in a terrible way, because maybe I didn't. But it still did not come across as funny to that person, and I can acknowledge their experience and how they felt about it without acting as if I did something horribly wrong when I maybe didn't. But it is worth taking a moment to think about it, and maybe it was a joke that I made in poor taste. Maybe it was a joke that really was inappropriate or out of line. And if it was, I need to acknowledge that. But if it wasn't, if it was, or what could reasonably have been considered a funny joke, and that person just didn't find it to be funny, I can acknowledge how they feel without diminishing my intent or experience either. One that I found particularly common, and that it didn't really sit well with me the way that it was supposedly resolved, and that one is, "I'm sorry that you felt that way." And it suggested that instead of saying "I'm sorry you felt that way," you should say, "I'm sorry I made you feel that way." The reality is that I may not have made you feel that way. Just because I said something and you felt a certain way about it does not mean that I made you feel that. Because I might say that same thing to 4 other people, and they all feel a different way about it. So the variable is the person and how they receive it, how you receive it. And that's okay. That doesn't have to be an accusatory thing. It doesn't have to be like, you took it wrong. But I'm not going to say that I made you feel something. I mean, obviously, the words I spoke had their part. And I can take responsibility for the fact that I spoke those words. And I can think about whether there was a better way to say it, whether I was insensitive, maybe. Like, there's always room for me to improve, and that needs to be part of the process. It's not just shoving it off on the other person. And it should not look like me shoving it off on you and saying that my words or my attitude or my approach had nothing to do with how you felt. But it also didn't have everything to do with how you felt. Half of that situation was what I said and how I said it, the way I delivered it. The other half was how you received it, based on your life experience and your perspective and everything else. And taking responsibility should not, for me, taking responsibility for me should not look like me removing all responsibility from you. I shouldn't be pushing you under the bus, but I shouldn't be throwing myself under the bus either in order to avoid it. So here's an example. Maybe I say, I disagree with you about something. And you say, that makes me feel very sad or very upset or whatever negative emotion. Different people with different experiences are able to receive disagreement with different levels of negative emotion on it. And if you are healthy, you're able to receive somebody else's disagreement with you without it causing a major problem, especially if it's respectful disagreement. And with an explanation, I see it differently. Here's why. This is my viewpoint. In all reality, that should not make the recipient of that message feel bad. It should not cause them to necessarily change their mind. It's just, here's what I think, here's why, consider it. Or don't, that's up to you. But I am presenting it for you to consider. If that makes you feel incredibly insecure or upset, that may not be your fault. It may be that, it may be that you had parents who always questioned every single decision you made and really never helped you develop the confidence to come to a conclusion and hear a different point of view and still believe in yourself enough to potentially follow through on the conclusion you came to after considering that person's point of view and deciding either I don't think it's accurate or I don't think it's right for me, or they are welcome to believe that and I can understand why they believe that, but I believe this. And so I'm going to proceed based on my beliefs. I've considered theirs, I've taken it into account, and I believe this still. And if you tell me you made me feel really upset by expressing disagreement, I am genuinely sorry that you felt that way. And I can say that as somebody who really cares about you and say, I'm really sorry you felt upset by me expressing my opinion on that. But if I say, I'm sorry I made you upset, expressing a different opinion is a reasonable action. Depending on the circumstance, maybe it's not necessary. Maybe you told me what you think about something and there's no reason for me to present a different viewpoint. But to be fair, if you have the right to tell me what you think, I also have the right to tell you what I think. And it's not, hopefully, ever intended to be a confrontation or a dismissal of your belief system or a challenge. Sometimes it's just conversation. It's just, oh, well, you told me what you think, and that feels like an invitation for me to share what I think. I'm not even trying to argue or persuade you to see it my way or anything else. It's just a sharing of ideas. And that's my reality. That's where I'm coming from. And in avoiding gaslighting you, I shouldn't be allowing myself to be gaslit, which starts to sound really picky, but if I'm sharing my thoughts and my perspective, And then somebody tells me I made them feel bad by doing that, that's questioning my reality and my intention, which was simply to follow up in the conversation, to hear their thoughts and express my own. So I also think that in that case, if I was to just throw myself under the bus and say, I'm sorry, I made you feel that way, when it wasn't really me who did that, that would be removing an opportunity for growth for both of us. Because maybe I have a little bit of room to reflect on the way I said it, what my intention was, whether I was being contrary or whether I was just sharing my thoughts. But I also had the opportunity to ask, why did that make you feel really upset? And maybe that's kind of the key, is like not to jump into defensiveness, because I didn't mean it that way, is defensive, or oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way, is kind of like just laying down and rolling over for the other person. And that's not fair either, because the whole point here is that neither person should have to do that for the other. So instead of like, you're wrong, I'm right, or I'm so sorry, I'm wrong, you're right, both of which just kind of dismiss the opportunity for growth and the opportunity for conversation and the opportunity for understanding. Maybe it should be more like not an I'm sorry at all, but a why did you feel that way? What about me expressing my opinion made you feel that way? In a very genuine, open-ended question, not like a pointed question like, well, how could that make you feel that way? But like genuinely, without trying to defend what I meant, or how I meant it, or whatever, just, oh, I didn't know that would make you feel upset. Why did it make you feel upset? What about it made you feel upset? And there's an opportunity to talk and grow. Maybe find out that that person was always questioned, and was every little thing they ever thought or believed was questioned and questioned and questioned. And that's just extremely hard to receive over and over. And what I said felt like that pattern that they've experienced their whole life. Now we're actually getting somewhere. Now we're actually getting somewhere where I can be supportive of their growth, instead of just making myself small and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. So those are some of my thoughts on the subject of gaslighting. I do think it's a very delicate subject. I do think we all have room to evaluate ourselves to make sure that we're not dismissing somebody else's feelings or experience through the way we communicate with them. And I also don't think that we have to make ourselves really small and apologetic all the time either, or take all of the responsibility, but that we can have conversations from a place of genuine caring, genuine respect, genuine well-wishing for everybody involved, and become stronger, more understanding, and more resilient people as a result. And I think that is the best alternative.